From the PEP Radio Newsroom, these are the stories we are following at this hour. The Environmental Protection Agency said Wednesday that it plans to weaken limits on some forever chemicals in drinking water that were finalized last year, while maintaining standards for two common ones. The Biden administration set the first federal drinking water limits for PFAs, or perfluoroalkyl and polyfluoroalkyl substances, finding they increase the risk of cardiovascular disease, certain cancers, and babies being born with low birth weight. Those limits on PFAs, which are human made and don't easily break down in nature, were expected to reduce their levels for millions of people. Limits on three types of PFAs, including what are known as Gen X substances found in North Carolina, will be scrapped and reconsidered by the agency, as will a limit on a mixture of several types of PFAs. The Biden administration's rule also set standards for the two common types of PFAs, referred to as PFOA and PFOS, at a 4 parts per trillion level, effectively the lowest level at which they can be reliably detected. The EPA will keep those standards, but give utilities 2 extra years, until 2031, to comply. Yet another rollback of Biden administration rules. Responding to complaints from the tech industry and other countries, the U.S. Department of Commerce has rescinded a Biden-era rule due to take effect Thursday that placed limits on the number of artificial intelligence chips that could be exported to certain international markets without federal approval. These new requirements would have stifled American innovation and saddled companies with burdensome new regulatory requirements, the Commerce Department stated in its guidance. President Joe Biden established the export framework shortly before he left office in an attempt to balance national security concerns about the technology with the economic interests of producers and other countries. While the United States had already restricted exports to adversaries such as China and Russia, some of those controls had loopholes, and the rule would have set limits on a much broader group of countries, including Middle Eastern countries that President Donald Trump is visiting this week. 4 rock climbers in the Cascade Mountains in Washington state fell 400 feet while climbing yesterday. A rock climber who fell hundreds of feet descending a steep gully in Washington's North Cascades Mountains survived the fall that killed 3 of his companions, hiked to his car in the dark, and then drove to a payphone to call for help, authorities said Tuesday. The surviving climber, Anton Celik, age 38, extricated himself from a tangle of ropes, helmets, and other equipment after the fall Saturday evening. Despite suffering internal bleeding and head trauma, Celik eventually, over at least a dozen hours, made the trek to the payphone, Okanagan County Undersheriff David Yarnell said. The climbers who were killed were Vishnu Iragireddy, age 48, Tim Nguyen, age 63, and Alexander Martinenko, age 36, Okanagan County Coroner Dave Rodriguez said. Authorities haven't been able to interview the survivor, who is in a Seattle hospital, said Rodriguez, who so much is still unknown of the fall and Celik's journey. Falls like this leading to 3 deaths are extremely rare, said Christina Woodworth, who leads the sheriff's search and rescue team. 7 years ago, 2 climbers were killed in a fall on El Capitan at Yosemite National Park in California. And finally, the regime marches on. House Republicans proposed sweeping tax breaks Monday in President Donald Trump's big priority bill, tallying at least $4.9 trillion in costs so far, partly paid for with the cuts to Medicaid, food stamps, and green energy programs used by millions of Americans. The House Ways and Means Committee named its package the One Big Beautiful Bill in all capital letters, a nod to Trump himself. It seeks to extend the tax breaks approved during Trump's first term and boost the standard deduction, child tax credit, and estate tax exemption, while adding new tax breaks on tipped wages, overtime pay, Social Security benefits, and auto loans that Trump promised during his campaign for the White House. There's also a tripling of the state and local tax deduction called SALT, from $10,000 up to $30,000 for couples, which certain high-tax state GOP lawmakers from New York and California already rejected as too meager. Private universities would be hit with a hefty new tax on their endowments, as much as 21%, as the Trump administration goes after the Ivy League and other campuses. And one unusual provision would terminate the tax-exempt status of groups the State Department says support terrorists, which civil society advocates warn is a way to potentially punish those at odds with the Trump administration. That's the news at this hour. Download the Live 365 app to take PEP Radio with you wherever you go. Up next is the local weather forecast for Meadville on PEP Radio.